I found out my wife was cheating on me. Not in some dramatic way, like catching her in bed with another man or reading a text message she forgot to delete. No. It was far more mundane, far more humiliating. A bank statement. A single transaction. A hotel room booked on a day when she was supposed to be at work late. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the paper in my hands, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear the muffled voices coming from the living room. My wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Liana, were watching TV together, laughing at something. My stomach twisted. How long? How many times? Who? A million questions ran through my mind, but before I could even process them, I heard footsteps. Liana walked into the kitchen, completely unaware of the storm inside me. She was 17, smart, stubborn, and too much like her mother sometimes. "Hey, Dad, can we order pizza tonight?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. I didn't answer. I was still gripping the bank statement. She finally glanced up at me and frowned. "What's wrong?" I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. "Nothing," I said, but she wasn't buying it. Her eyes flicked to the paper in my hand. Before I could react, she snatched it away and scanned the page. Her face barely changed. No shock, no confusion. Just a slow, deliberate sigh. And then she said it. "You're ruining our family over Mom's little affair." My blood turned to ice. "What?" I choked out. She crossed her arms. "I mean, yeah, she messed up. But why are you acting like this is the end of the world? You're gonna blow up everything over something that doesn't even matter?" I just stared at her, my mind unable to process what I was hearing. She knew. She knew and didn't care. "How long have you known?" I whispered. Liana rolled her eyes. "Does it matter?" Oh, it mattered. It mattered more than anything. And suddenly, I had a terrifying thought. What else had Sarah told her? I felt like the ground had cracked beneath my feet. Liana stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one being irrational. Like I was the one overreacting. "What do you mean, does it matter?" My voice was lower now, barely more than a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was afraid of waking Sarah in the next room or if I was just afraid of the answer. She sighed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Dad, it's not a big deal. People cheat. It happens." I blinked. My own daughter was telling me this. My 17-year-old daughter, who I'd spent my entire life trying to protect, to raise with values, was standing here, treating infidelity like it was some minor inconvenience. My stomach churned. "Since when did you know?" She shrugged. "A while. A while." That could mean weeks, months, years? The walls of my house suddenly felt unfamiliar. Like I'd been living inside someone else's lie. "You knew your mother was having an affair, and you didn't tell me?" She rolled her eyes. "What was I supposed to do, Dad? Run to you like some little kid tattling on Mom? It's not that simple." I clenched my jaw. "Yes, Liana. It is that simple. Your mother is betraying me, betraying this family and you." I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. "You just let it happen," Liana scoffed. "God, Dad, you're so dramatic." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. She was serious. "Do you even care?" I asked. "At all?" She hesitated, just for a second. Just long enough for me to see something flicker in her expression, something uncertain, something deeper. But then, just as quickly it was gone. "Of course I care," she said. I don't think it's worth blowing up our whole lives over." I ran a hand down my face, trying to ground myself. "Liana, listen to me. This isn't just some mistake. Your mother lied. She broke our marriage. And you're gonna make it worse by freaking out and leaving, right?" She shot back. That hit me harder than I expected. "You think I should just stay? Pretend like nothing happened?" "Yeah, maybe," she said. "People move past this stuff all the time. It's not like she doesn't love you. It's just..." She trailed off, struggling to find the words. "Just what?" I pressed. Liana shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated. Complicated. Another meaningless word people use to justify betrayal. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She wasn't just defending Sarah. She was protecting her. And that meant one thing. Sarah had gotten to her first. Sarah had gotten to her first. That thought settled in my stomach like a stone. Liana wasn't just defending her mother, she had been conditioned to. Fed whatever narrative Sarah had spun, manipulated into believing that this was just something minor, something we could brush under the rug. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly did your mother tell you? Liana's gaze flickered, just for a second, before she folded her arms tighter across her chest. She told me the truth. My pulse pounded. And what is that, exactly? That you'd overreact, she said bluntly. That you'd act like the whole world was ending over something that wasn't a big deal. That you'd probably storm off, maybe even leave us, because you can't handle it. I let out a sharp laugh, one without humor. So she knew I'd find out. She was preparing you for this conversation. Liana didn't say anything. That silence told me everything. I shook my head. And you just believed her? What else was I supposed to do, Dad? She snapped. Mom told me before you even knew. She explained everything. She told me she made a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to happen, but... But what? I cut in. She hesitated again. Another flicker of something she wasn't saying. But you've been distant for a long time, she finally said. She said you two weren't happy, that you didn't notice her anymore. That she felt alone. My jaw tightened. The classic excuse. The cheater blaming the victim. So that justifies what she did? I asked, my voice low. No, Liana admitted. But it explains it. I stared at her, at this child I had raised, and for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't know her at all. You're defending her, I said quietly. She didn't deny it. I exhaled, shaking my head. Do you even care how this makes me feel? What this does to me? Of course I care, she shot back. But I care about this family too. I don't want us to fall apart over something stupid. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. Liana, listen to me. This is not something stupid. Your mother betrayed me. She lied to me. And now she's lying to you, making you believe that this is just some small mistake, that I'm the bad guy for not just accepting it. She looked away, jaw clenched. I just don't want to lose my family. I softened, my anger shifting into something heavier. Sweetheart, I don't want that either. But your mother already made that choice for us. Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she mumbled. Are you gonna leave? I swallowed hard. The truth was, I didn't know. That depends, I said. On what? On just how much of this truth your mother has been hiding. Liana's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't like my answer. You make it sound like Mom is some kind of mastermind, she muttered, crossing her arms tighter. Like she's plotting against you or something. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice level. She didn't just cheat, Liana. She prepared you for this conversation before I even knew. That's not just guilt, that's control. She shook her head, looking away. You always think the worst. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Tell me something. If I hadn't found that bank statement, were you ever going to tell me? Liana's mouth opened, then closed. Her silence was my answer. I clenched my jaw, nodding to myself. Right. Dad, come on, she said softer now. What good would it have done? If you never knew, we could have just kept going, and everything would have been fine. I stared at her like she'd just spoken another language. Fine? I repeated. You think living in a lie is fine? It's better than losing everything, she snapped. Better than you leaving, better than us having to split up everything, better than. She stopped herself, her face twisting with frustration. I swallowed hard. Is that what this is really about? You're afraid of me leaving? She didn't answer. A sudden, bitter realization hit me. Sarah had made me the villain before I'd even had a chance to react. She told you I'd leave, didn't she? I asked. Liana looked at the floor. That was all the confirmation I needed. Jesus Christ, I whispered, running a hand through my hair. She was afraid. Not of what her mother had done, but of what I might do because of it. And that meant Sarah had been planting this idea in her head for a while. Long enough to make Liana believe that I was the real threat to our family. I felt sick. Liana, I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady, I love you. No matter what happens between your mother and me, I am still your father. I will always be here for you. She tensed like she didn't believe me. But I need to know the truth, I continued. No more half-truths, no more protecting your mom. Tell me everything you know. Liana swallowed hard, her hands gripping the counter behind her. And then, barely above a whisper, she said, You don't want to know. A chill ran through me. Yes, I did. And now, more than ever, I was afraid of what that truth might be. You don't want to know. Liana's voice was barely audible, but it hit me like a gunshot. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. Try me. She hesitated. Her fingers drummed anxiously against the kitchen counter, her eyes darting toward the hallway, toward the bedroom where Sarah was, oblivious to this conversation. Or maybe not. Maybe she was listening. Maybe she was always one step ahead. Liana, I pressed. Whatever it is, I need to know. I deserve to know. She let out a shaky breath, avoiding my eyes. It's not just one time, she finally admitted. It's not some mistake like she said. She's been seeing him for a while. My chest tightened. How long? Liana shifted uncomfortably. A year. Maybe longer. A year. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table, grounding myself. My head spun. My wife, the woman I shared a life with, had been sneaking around behind my back for over a year. And you knew this whole time? My voice came out raw, barely controlled. She winced. Not at first. But I found out a few months ago. How? She hesitated again, chewing her lip. I caught her sneaking out one night. She tried to lie at first, said she was going to see a friend. But I followed her. She met up with him at some hotel. After that, I started noticing things, late nights, secret phone calls, the way she'd always hide her screen when you walked in. The bile rose in my throat. And you never thought to tell me? Her face twisted. And say what, Dad? That Mom's cheating? Do you know what that would have done to us? This is what it's done to us. I gestured wildly between us, my pulse hammering. Keeping it a secret didn't protect this family, Liana. It just let her keep lying, keep doing whatever the hell she wanted without consequences. Tears welled in her eyes, but she swallowed them back. I was trying to protect you. I let out a bitter laugh. By keeping me in the dark? She flinched but didn't answer. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay focused. There was still something she wasn't telling me. I could feel it. Who is he? I finally asked. Liana froze. And that was the moment I knew. I thought the affair was the worst part. I was wrong. Tell me, I demanded, my voice low, dangerous. She shook her head. Dad, please don't. Who is he, Liana? Her lips trembled. She looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw something real in her eyes. Fear. And then, she whispered the last thing I ever expected. You know him. You know him. Liana's words sent a cold shock through my veins. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering in my ears. What do you mean, I know him? She hesitated, biting her lip so hard I thought it might bleed. Liana, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Tell me. She swallowed, her gaze flicking toward the hallway again. Like she was afraid Sarah might appear at any moment and stop her from speaking. Then, barely audible, she said his name. And my entire world stopped. No. No, that wasn't possible. That didn't make any sense. I stared at her, my mind rejecting what I had just heard. What did you just say? She flinched. Dad, please. Say it again. She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head. But the name had already been spoken. It was out there now, poisoning the air around us. I felt like the walls of my own home were caving in. Out of all the people Sarah could have been with, out of every possible betrayal, it had to be him. My best friend. I couldn't breathe. The name echoed in my head, over and over, until it felt like it had burned itself into my skull. My best friend. My hands clenched into fists, my body vibrating with something between rage and devastation. Liana stood there silent, watching me like I might explode. How long? I asked, my voice barely recognizable. Dad? How long, Liana? She hesitated, then looked away. I think, since before Mom told me. Maybe a year and a half. Maybe more. My stomach churned. I felt like I might throw up. My best friend. The man I trusted. The man who had been to my house more times than I could count. Who had sat across from me at dinners, toasted drinks with me, asked about my life, my marriage, knowing the entire time that he was sleeping with my wife. I could picture it now, every little moment that suddenly made sense. The way Sarah always seemed a little too interested in what he had to say. The way she would laugh at his jokes, touch his arm just a little longer than necessary. And him, acting like my brother, like someone who had my back. It had all been a lie. You knew, I said, my voice trembling with something dark. Liana flinched. Not at first. But yeah? And you still defended her? She let out a shaky breath. I just wanted things to stay the same. I didn't want to lose our family. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Our family was already gone, Liana. The second your mother brought him into it, she destroyed everything. She wiped at her eyes. I didn't know what to do, Dad. I thought, maybe if you never found out, we could just keep going. I stared at her, at my own daughter, so desperate to keep this twisted reality together that she had helped cover for her mother. You didn't just keep her secret, I said slowly. You helped her lie to me. Liana's breath hitched, but she didn't deny it. That was the final knife. I turned away from her, staring blankly at the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to destroy something. I didn't remember grabbing my keys. I didn't remember walking out the door. All I knew was that I was suddenly in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My pulse pounded in my ears, my breaths came in sharp, ragged bursts. My best friend. Nick. The man I had trusted with everything. The man who had stood beside me for years, through every high and low, through every struggle and success. The man who had been sleeping with my wife. I barely registered the road as I drove. My hands were steady, but my mind was unraveling, playing every memory I had of him in a sickening new light. How many times had I invited him into my home, oblivious to what was really going on? How many times had he sat across from me, pretending to be my friend while he was betraying me in the worst way possible? I pressed harder on the gas. By the time I reached his house, my body was buzzing with adrenaline. I barely managed to put the car in park before I was out, slamming the door behind me. The porch light was on. His car was in the driveway. He was home. Good. I stormed up the steps and pounded on the door. No answer. I hit it again, harder this time. Nick! My voice was a growl, raw and seething. Open the damn door! A few seconds passed, then I heard movement inside. The sound of footsteps. The click of a lock. The door cracked open, and then there he was. Nick. His face shifted from confusion to something else, something wary, the second he saw me. Dave? What the hell? I didn't let him finish. My fist connected with his jaw so hard that pain exploded up my arm. Nick staggered back, clutching his face, eyes wide with shock. What the Jesus, man, what the hell is wrong with you? I stepped inside, slamming the door shut behind me. My chest heaved, my fists still clenched, my whole body vibrating with fury. You! I spat. Yo, what's wrong with me? Nick's expression twisted. What the hell are you talking about? I let out a bitter laugh. Don't you dare play dumb, you son of a bitch! I know. His face paled. Just slightly. I saw it. I saw the guilt, the fear. I knew. You've been screwing my wife, I said, my voice like acid. For over a year. And you looked me in the face. You shook my hand. You sat at my table. And you lied. Nick swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Dave, listen. Say it. He hesitated. I stepped closer. Say it, Nick. Say the words. Admit it. For a moment he didn't. And then, barely above a whisper, he said it. I'm sorry. That was all it took. I saw red. I'm sorry. That was all it took. Rage surged through me like a wildfire. Before I even registered what I was doing, I lunged at him. Nick barely had time to react before my fist crashed into his ribs. He stumbled backward, gasping, knocking over a chair as he hit the ground. I didn't stop. I grabbed the front of his shirt and hauled him up, slamming him against the wall so hard the pictures rattled. You're sorry? I roared, my face inches from his. You think that means a damn thing to me? His breath came in short, panicked bursts. Dave, just listen. I hit him again. Not as hard this time, but enough to make my point. Enough to make him feel it. You were my best friend. I spat. I would have done anything for you. And you did this to me? Nick groaned, holding his side. His face was twisted in pain, but he didn't try to fight back. I didn't mean for it to happen. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh, really? You just tripped and fell into my wife's bed? Over and over again? He swallowed hard, his hands shaking. I know I messed up. I know You don't know a damn thing. I cut him off. Because if you did, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. Nick sucked in a breath, wincing. Dave, please. I swear, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him back against the wall again. Then tell me, Nick. What the hell was it supposed to be? He hesitated. For just a second. And in that second, I saw something flicker across his face. Something I didn't like. Regret? No. Something else. Something deeper. And suddenly, a sickening realization washed over me. This wasn't just about the affair. There was something else. Something I didn't know. I tightened my grip. You're hiding something, I growled. Aren't you? Nick's jaw clenched. I felt my pulse spike. I was right. There was more. And whatever it was going to make everything even worse. Nick didn't answer. But he didn't have to. I saw it in his eyes. A flicker of panic. A hesitation. A split-second decision playing out in his mind, like he was trying to calculate whether to lie or finally come clean. I pressed him harder against the wall. Tell me, Nick. His jaw clenched. Dave, just let me explain. Explain? I barked out a laugh, sharp and humorless. You think there's a version of this where I just nod and say, oh, okay, makes sense, no big deal? Nick flinched, his hands raised slightly, a pathetic attempt to calm me down. Look, it wasn't just some fling, all right? He cut himself off, like he realized too late that he had said too much. I felt something cold slither down my spine. What do you mean, wasn't just some fling? My voice was quieter now. Darker. Nick exhaled shakily. His hands ran through his hair, his entire body vibrating with tension. His throat bobbed. I love her, Dave. I went still. The words hit me harder than any punch I had thrown. I stared at him, my mind blank, as if my brain refused to process what I had just heard. Love? He loved her. Nick must have seen the shift in my face because he quickly tried to backtrack. I didn't mean for it to happen, alright? It started as something physical, and then it. I grabbed him by the collar and shoved him back again. Don't, I hissed. Don't you dare try to justify this to me. Nick's breathing was ragged now. Dave, please, I swear. You love her? My voice came out raw. His silence was the answer. I let go of his collar and took a step back, my heart slamming against my ribs. My mind reeled. The room felt suffocating. Sarah hadn't just cheated. She had fallen for him. They weren't just screwing behind my back. They were together. My wife and my best friend. The life I thought I had, the family I thought I was protecting, had been nothing but a facade. And I was the only one who didn't know. A bitter, empty laugh escaped my throat. How long? My voice was flat now, devoid of emotion. Nick hesitated. Dave! How long, Nick? He exhaled, looking down at the floor. And then, he muttered the words that shattered everything. Since before you and Sarah were married. Since before you and Sarah were married. The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air between us, hollow and impossible. A mistake. A misunderstanding. He couldn't have said what I thought he said. But then Nick lifted his head and met my eyes. And I knew. I knew. My knees nearly buckled. My breath caught in my throat. What did you just say? My voice came out quiet. Deadly. Nick swallowed hard. He looked like he wanted to take the words back, but it was too late. The damage was done. You were sleeping with my wife before we were even married? His silence was all the confirmation I needed. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, my fist crashed into his face again. Harder than before. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, sending it shattering to the floor. You were my best man. I snarled, grabbing him by the collar, dragging him up. You stood next to me at my wedding, while you were screwing my wife behind my back? Dave! Don't say my name! I shoved him back against the wall. Nick's face was red, his lips split, blood trailing down his chin. But I didn't care. I wanted to see him bleed. I wanted to see him suffer the way I was suffering. You've been lying to me for years. I spat. How long, Nick? How many times? Did you ever even stop? He exhaled shakily. We ended it when she married you, he muttered. But then, a few years later I didn't let him finish. Another punch. Another sickening crunch as my fist met his cheekbone. He groaned, clutching his face, but I wasn't done. You never ended it, I said, breathing hard. You just pressed pause. And the second you had the chance, you picked up right where you left off. Nick didn't respond. He just wiped the blood from his lip, eyes cast downward. He wasn't fighting back. Because there was nothing to fight. I stepped back, my body shaking, my breath ragged. You and Sarah, I said, my voice raw. You've been lying to me since the very beginning. Nick swallowed. Dave, I swear. Shut up. He flinched. For the first time tonight, he actually looked scared. Good. Because I wasn't just furious anymore. I was done. I took one last look at him, the man I had once considered a brother, and realized he was nothing but a stranger to me now. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going home. I drove without a destination. The city lights blurred past me, streaks of red and white flashing in my peripheral vision. My grip on the steering wheel was tight, my knuckles aching from the punches I'd thrown. But the pain in my hands was nothing compared to the storm inside me. Sarah and Nick. Not just an affair. Not just some mistake that had spiraled out of control. They had been together before Sarah and I had even exchanged vows. Before we had built a life. Before we had a daughter. Had she ever really loved me? Or was I just some pathetic placeholder, some backup plan while she kept her real love hidden in the shadows? A sickening thought hit me. Was Liana even mine? My stomach twisted. No. No, I wasn't going to do this. Not now. Not while I was barely holding myself together. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to breathe. Trying to process. But every time I closed my eyes I saw them. Nick, standing beside me at the altar, smiling like a brother. Sarah, slipping her ring onto my finger, whispering I love you. Lies. All of it. I slammed my fist into the dashboard. Pain shot up my arm, but I welcomed it. Anything was better than the feeling in my chest, the crushing, unbearable weight of betrayal. A buzzing sound broke through the silence. My phone. I pulled it from my pocket, my hands shaking. Sarah. Of course. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. For a second, I considered throwing the damn thing out the window. But then, something shifted inside me. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it. I swiped to answer and pressed the phone to my ear. For a moment, there was nothing but static and shallow breathing. Then, Dave? Her voice was soft, cautious. Fake. I swallowed the rage bubbling up in my throat. Sarah. Where are you? She asked, like she had the right to know. I let out a hollow laugh. Why? So you can run off and meet him? Silence. Then, Liana told you. A fresh wave of anger hit me. Liana knew. My voice was low, dangerous. Our daughter knew, Sarah. She knew what you were doing, and instead of stopping, instead of telling me, you let her carry that burden while you kept sneaking around. She exhaled shakily. It's not that simple, Dave. I gritted my teeth. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how the woman I married, the mother of my child, spent years lying to me. Tell me, Sarah, was I just an obstacle? Some convenient idiot to keep around while you and Nick played house behind my back? That's not fair, she whispered. Not fair? I nearly laughed. What part of this is fair to me, Sarah? More silence. Then, softly, I never meant to hurt you. A sharp, bitter taste filled my mouth. That's the thing, isn't it? I said. You never meant for me to find out. That's the only part you regret. Sarah let out a breath. Please, Dave, just come home. Let's talk. I clenched my jaw. Home? The house where she had kissed me with the same lips she used to kiss him? The home I had built on a foundation of lies? No, I said. I heard her inhale sharply. Dave. I'm done, Sarah. My voice was ice. I don't know where I'm going. But I'm not coming back to you. I ended the call before she could respond. And for the first time all night, I felt like I had made the right choice. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the dark road ahead. The conversation with Sarah echoed in my head, looping like a broken record. I never meant to hurt you. Bullshit. She didn't care about hurting me. She only cared that I found out. The rage was still there, simmering just beneath my skin, but now something else started creeping in. Emptiness. I had spent years of my life devoted to a family that wasn't even real. My wife had been lying to me since before we were married. My best friend had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And my own daughter. I exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel. Liana. I didn't blame her. Not entirely. Sarah had manipulated her, twisted the truth until she believed that keeping her mother's secret was the best way to protect the family. But that didn't change the fact that she had known. That hurt more than I was willing to admit. A knock on my window snapped me out of my thoughts. I turned sharply, my pulse spiking. A man stood outside my car, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. He looked familiar, but my mind was too clouded to place him at first. I cracked the window. Can I help you? He hesitated. Dave? I frowned. Yeah, who are you? He exhaled, shifting awkwardly. It's Matt. Nick's brother. My stomach turned. Nick's brother. I hadn't seen Matt in years. He had always been the quieter one, the black sheep of their family. While Nick had been the charming, easygoing golden boy, Matt had kept to himself. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. Matt glanced around the empty parking lot, then leaned in slightly. "I heard about what happened. About Sarah and Nick." The anger flared up again. "Did you know?" His jaw tightened. "No. And if I had, I swear to God I would have told you." I studied him, trying to decide if I believed him. Finally I exhaled, leaning back against my seat. "So why are you here?" Matt hesitated. "Because I think there's something you don't know. And you need to." A chill ran down my spine. I had spent the whole night thinking I had already uncovered the worst of it. But now, looking at Matt's serious expression, I realized something terrifying. There was more. And I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But I had no choice. "Tell me," I said. Matt took a deep breath. And then, he said the words that would change everything. Matt took a deep breath, his expression heavy. "You think the worst part is that Sarah and Nick were sneaking around behind your back," he said. "But that's not the whole story, Dave. There's something else." A cold weight settled in my chest. I had spent the entire night unraveling betrayal after betrayal, and now Matt was standing in front of me, telling me that I still didn't know everything. I clenched my fists. "Just say it." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Nick told me something a long time ago. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, after everything, I can't ignore it." I swallowed hard. "What?" Matt exhaled sharply. "He wasn't just sleeping with Sarah. He was planning to leave with her." The air left my lungs. "What?" My voice came out quiet, almost numb. Matt nodded. "He told me months ago that Sarah was unhappy. That she was tired of pretending, tired of lying. He said they talked about finally making things real. About her leaving you for him." A sickening wave of nausea hit me. "That's why he kept it going," Matt continued. "Because he thought she was going to choose him." I gritted my teeth, my body tensing. "Then why didn't she?" Matt hesitated again, and I knew this was the real blow. "Because of Liana," he said finally. "Nick said she wasn't sure how Liana would handle it. That she thought it would destroy her if you two split up. So she stayed." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my throat. "She stayed for Liana," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Not for me. Not for our marriage. Not because she felt even a shred of loyalty to me. But because she didn't want to deal with the consequences. All those years, all those moments I thought were real, the times I believed we were working through things, fixing things. It was all a stall. Sarah had been ready to leave me. She just didn't have the courage to do it." Matt shifted, looking uncomfortable. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you. But you needed to know." I inhaled sharply, trying to steady myself. But there was no steadying myself after this. I had spent the last few hours thinking my life had already fallen apart. But now, staring at Matt, I realized something horrifying. This wasn't the collapse. This was just the aftermath. And I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do next. I sat there, staring at Matt, my mind blank. Sarah was planning to leave me. She had been ready to walk away from everything we built. From me. From our marriage. The only reason she stayed was Liana. Not love. Not regret. Not even guilt. Just fear of what it would do to our daughter. My throat felt tight. All these years. I thought we were working through things. I thought we had rough patches like any other marriage, but that deep down, she was still with me. But I was wrong. She had already chosen him. She just didn't have the guts to admit it. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "So what? She kept playing house with me while sneaking off with Nick?" Matt shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know, man. Maybe she thought she could have both. Keep the family together, but still have him." I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening into fists. Sarah had wanted a double life. She didn't want the responsibility of breaking our family apart. She wanted to keep her perfect little world intact while keeping her real desires hidden. And Liana, our daughter, was the only thing keeping her from choosing him. I exhaled, rubbing a hand down my face. Does Nick know? Matt hesitated. Does he know? I repeated, my voice sharper. He suspects, Matt admitted. I think that's why he never pushed her too hard. Deep down, I think he knew she wouldn't actually leave you. That's why he was so desperate to keep it going behind your back. I scoffed. So what? He just sat around, hoping she'd finally choose him? Matt sighed. Yeah. And she let him. She let both of you believe whatever was easiest for her. I clenched my teeth, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had spent so much time being angry at Nick. But Sarah was worse. Nick had betrayed me, yeah? He had destroyed our friendship, humiliated me. But Sarah had been lying to me for years. Every kiss. Every smile. Every "I love you." I hated her in that moment. I hated that I had wasted my love on someone so selfish. Matt exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, man. I don't know what you're gonna do next. But whatever it is, just don't let them drag you down with them. I stared at him, my mind whirling. I had thought leaving the house was my escape. But now I realized I still had one more thing to do. One more conversation to have. I had to go back. Not for her. Not for Liana. For me. Because if Sarah wanted to keep living in her perfect lie, if she thought she could still manipulate this into whatever was easiest for her, she was about to learn the hard way that I was done playing her game. I pulled into the driveway, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The house was dark, except for a dim light in the living room. She was waiting for me. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to beg for answers. I was here to end this. I stepped out of the car, each movement slow and deliberate. My body was still buzzing with adrenaline, but my mind was clear now. For the first time all night, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale. She looked up the second I entered, her eyes filled with something between relief and hesitation. Dave, she breathed, standing up. You came back. I shut the door behind me. Yeah. Her shoulders sagged slightly, like she had been holding her breath. Like she thought I had come back to talk things through. But she was wrong. I wasn't here to fix this. She took a careful step forward. Look, I know you're angry. I know this is a lot. But we can. Stop. The word cut through the air like a blade. Sarah froze. I took another step inside, exhaling slowly. This marriage is over, Sarah. Her face twisted. Dave. You don't love me. I continued, my voice steady. You haven't for a long time. Hell, maybe you never did. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance to interrupt. You were ready to leave me, I said. The only reason you didn't was because of Liana. I let out a sharp laugh. Not because you cared about me. Not because you regretted it. You stayed because it was easier. Sarah's hands shook. That's not true. It is, I said. And you know it. Her breath hitched. Dave, please. Nick told me everything. The color drained from her face. I let the words sink in. Let her feel the weight of them. He was waiting for you, I said. He thought you were going to choose him. And you let him believe that, just like you let me believe we still had a marriage. Sarah's lower lip trembled. For the first time, I saw something real in her expression. Not sadness. Not regret. Panic. Because she had lost control of the situation. She took a step closer, reaching for me. I never wanted to hurt you. I pulled back. Don't, I said. Don't touch me. Don't lie to me. Tears welled in her eyes. What about Liana? She whispered. A sharp pain shot through my chest, but I kept my face unreadable. She's my daughter. And I'll always be there for her. But I'm done being a part of this mess you created. Sarah's breath was uneven now. So that's it. That's it, I said. She wiped at her face, staring at me like she couldn't believe this was really happening. Like she thought, even after everything, that she could talk her way out of this. She couldn't. I turned toward the stairs. I'm packing a bag. I'll be gone in 20 minutes. Sarah let out a shaky breath. Where are you going? I paused, looking at her one last time. I don't know, I admitted. But anywhere is better than here. And with that I walked away. Away from the lies. Away from the life I thought I had. Away from the woman who had never really been mine. And for the first time in years I felt free.